Hello, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast with podcast number 7 on issues and conundrums facing the Las Vegas Raiders heading into training camp. We're literally sitting here today, 1 week away from veterans reporting, and then it's on. Here we go. Away we go for the season. And so this is a very big deal. It's an enormous big deal for this team. And issue number 7 is one that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily equate to being a big issue. But when you've been around the game for a long time, you understand how clearly it is. That is the issue of verbiage and expectations. Now, I need to understand when I talk about expectations, I'm not talking about wins or losses. Obviously, the expectation is to win every game. I'm going to get into the details and dig into the nitty gritty. Let's start with verbiage. This is why you want to sustain and have consistency in your coaching staff. Because when you bring in new coaches, you're changing verbiage. And what happens is not only is Chip Kelly changing verbiage, but all of the other coaches now are having to learn their verbiage, and you do your verbiage based upon the OC. So Chip Kelly doesn't have to change his language. Everybody else has to change theirs. And you may say, well, why is that a big deal? Well, try going and learning a new language. I'll give you a quick example. I'm not going to name the team, but a friend of mine who's a very successful NFL quarterback, changed teams. And so, in one team, they used the term, I'm going to make a word up so nobody knows, what team, but let's say they used the word dart. And dart would mean a quick slant. So if they're doing the call and they go set blue 24, they may name, they may say bar, they may name a drink, they name a bar in the city where the team plays, whatever, or any type of thing to know a dart is a quick slant. Now, he actually told me this story and the word was not dart. I'm making up that part. And so he goes to his next team and they don't use that verbiage for a quick slant on a quick audible. And so there is all of the verbiage. There's the offensive lineman verbiage. There is the the verbiage that comes with wide receivers. Now, fortunately for the Raiders, they keep Patrick Graham, but there's still a bunch of new defensive coaches that are going to have to learn Patrick Graham's verbiage. And so that becomes a major deal. Now, you may say, yeah, but they've been working on it. They have. But in the heat of fighting, and when I say fighting, football, sometimes it's hard to remember your muscle memory. And so it is all the name of the game is verbiage. Now, I'll tell you another interesting story. I knew a player who was not a quarterback who joins a team as a free agent. At the same time, a quarterback that he played with previously goes to this team as a free agent. And so they're in a situation one time, I think it was the second game of the year, actual game, not even preseason. And the quarterback saw something and wanted to do something with it. So he yells out an audible that only this receiver would know. It was from the previous team. The problem is the previous year, they had used that term to mean something else. So he calls out this team thinking no one else in the team is going to know what it is, but it doesn't matter. My receiver will. Offensive line blocked differently, and it was an illegal man downfield penalty on what should have been a really good penalty. Anytime you change coordinators, there are verbiage issues. And so it's going to be Gino learning the verbiage. And we all know he can. It's not a question of intelligence. It's not a question of ability. It is a question of learning those type of nuances. Most people don't think of verbiage when they think of, boy, what are going to be some adjustments? And then Pete Carroll reserves the right to come in and say, no, Patrick, I know that this is how you call your defense, but I want this word to mean this. So when I'm on the headset and I tell you, I'll give you one. I know I'm going to change the word. I know a head coach that has a hallelujah package. He doesn't. It's another word, but I don't want to use that word just simply to protect them. And so he brings in a new defensive coordinator and says, this is what we're going to call our hallelujah package. So during the game, all he has to do is say in his headset, hallelujah. And DC knows this is the defense that I want, the base defense that I want. Okay. And so there is so much verbiage. There's so much verbiage in an NFL team and in an NFL game. There's play calls, there's audibles, there's what things look like. I mean, you've heard me say before, on a route tree, a straight line, you hear a lot of people call it a bomb. Okay, most people call it a 9 route because it's at the top of the tree. It's straight. Some coaches, some meaning probably 20%, call it a 7 because it's a touchdown run, pass. Okay, there are so many different verbal commands and orders that when you study the verbiage of a football game, it is enormous. I once heard it explained to me this way, and I thought it was a fascinating explanation. That every time you come in and change verbiage on a team, it is literally like learning another language. And so you always hear people joke about, oh, football players are stupid. That in and of itself is dumb. Absolutely not even close to reality. But try having to learn a new language all the time. And then you only have a couple months. And then you got to be ready to go to a football game where, boom, they come in. Now, here are other parts of verbiage. All right. You have some offenses like a Josh McDaniels and a John Gruden that can go upwards of 12 to 15 words. Then you got some that are 7 or 8. But if you've got 600 plays, that's a big deal. Now, here's the next part. The Raiders playbook isn't even going to be close to the same at the end of the year as it is at the beginning. Each week, they're going to add plays to the playbook. Now, here's why that's important. Because you may start with a 3-ring binder. Obviously, it'll be I forgot what those things are called. It's not a laptop. I've just bought one for my son. It's not a laptop, tablet. But I'm trying to give it in vernacular that older people would recognize. You may start with a 3-ring binder and end with 4 or 5 of them. So you have thousands of plays. So you're in week 17 and your coach may call a play you haven't seen since week 1. And so verbiage is learning all of these new plays all of the time. It is a massive amount of information. And so as you're learning all this, you're trying to remember. I have a very good friend, an offensive lineman in the National Football League, and a very successful offensive lineman. Great guy. And he had played at this team for a few years. They change offensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator comes in, changes the verbiage. Fine, no big deal. And they use a play in I think it was week 5 or 6. So they hadn't really practiced it in training camp. Put the play in week 5 or 6. They get to a playoff game, and he calls the same play. Now, they hadn't even used the play in 3 months. And when he heard it, a word in it clicked back to what they had done for years before. And he made a huge mistake. And that's why getting it down is such a big deal. The verbiage is enormous when you're trying to piece together your football team and you're trying to get everyone on the same page. Now, let's talk about expectations. Again, we're not talking about win and loss. Each coach wants teams to practice a different way. For example, Josh McDaniels wanted them to practice so fast that, hey, just practice fast. We'll go back and watch the film after practice and go through all your mistakes. Last year with Antonio Pierce, they had the big screens on the side of the field. And there were times where it felt like, especially under Getsy, but really the whole year, they wasted tons of practice time because they'd go over and correct it right away. I kind of like the quick correction and go back and watch the video after. The most successful teams that I have covered, that's what they do. I can see where it works on the side when you're watching film, so I like that. I do like that. But I don't like it the way they did it last year. To me, they lost a lot of practice time. And so that's just one. Understanding what are the expectations for practice. Okay? A lot of coaches are like, listen, we're not running sprints. You're a professional. Show up at work. We don't have to get you in shape. You should be in shape when training camp starts. That's pretty much every coach and program. But some coaches still will run a little bit. Most won't. And what else are expectations? Okay, I know one team that as soon as practice is over, they usually give about an hour. That's enough for the players to shower, eat, and then go into their evening their evening session. Now, the reason they like the hour, though, is if a player doesn't feel like he really had a good practice, he can stay after and work a little later on his own, then go shower and eat and go to session. Some teams, they want it, nope, as soon as practice is over, let's go, let's get right to the session, get you out early. And I know guys where that transition has happened and it really bugged them because they like to work after practice. They like to do that extra work. So again, it's understanding expectations and what are they. Now, let me give you a couple more. Okay. I know of teams that set their expectation after every training camp practice. All the players have to sign a minimum of 10 autographs. I know some teams that say, no, we just assign certain players each day. Okay. Those are still things you need to learn. Understand, those are things you normally don't think about. Okay. Diet. There are some players that come in and the expectation is eat any and everything you want. Then there are some players that come in, no, we put you in the bod pod. We want to change a couple things. We're going to change your diet. There's the expectation of diet. Then they're still lifting during camp. So some guys get into a routine, they lift early. But then during training camp, you may have to lift late. All of that. And I understand you may say, why is that a big deal, Hondo? Because football players and athletes really in general are creatures of habit. So it's just learning. I know John Gruden loved to practice early. So there was an adjustment when they got to Vegas with guys that wanted to lift early because they wanted to sleep too. And there was an adjustment. I remember one of them in particular talking to me about it. So as we look at issue number 7, this is an issue most fans would not think about, but there's verbiage. You usually see a lot of mistakes early when there's big changes, which you have a head coach, offensive coordinator, and a bunch of new players. There's verbiage. Some of these young players are not used to playing with detail play calling on offense and especially on defense like they're going to get under Patrick Graham. That is always adjustment for almost every defensive player because he's highly intelligent and his plays are very specific. That's a big deal to PG. So, you know, when you talk about rookies adjusting, I'll give you one. I know a quarterback, Jackson Dart, who at Ole Miss, there wasn't really a snap count. And talking to people up in New York, they were completely impressed with how he mastered doing a snap count when that wasn't really the case at Ole Miss. but he spent massive amounts of time working on it. That's why I project he'll be the starter long before the year's over. He's putting in that kind of time. It's because they told him, we need you ready. But that's a verbiage issue that Jackson Dart's going to have to learn. Geno Smith knows what Pete Carroll wants, but he's going to have to learn the verbiage of a Chip Kelly. So that's where all this is simply going. This is a big hurdle that fans may not think about, but is vitally important. Understanding the verbiage issue, how to get that in control, and managing expectations. It may not seem like much, but it's an awfully big deal as you get ready for training camp. Remember, si.com/NFL/Raiders for all of your best Raiders coverage. Please check that out. Number 2, don't miss. When you go follow me on Twitter at Hondo Carpenter, and when you go to IG and Threads, when you go to @HondoSR. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.